Alright, in this video I'm going to show you how to do a bridle joint. This is your bridle joint. It looks like that when it's pulled apart. Alright, so we've got our pieces here. First thing we need to do is mark our thickness down from the end. So you can use your second piece of timber to do that. Get your sharp pencil, put a little mark in here. So I'm using my fingers to make sure it's flush, and we'll transfer that mark across and around all the way. There we go. Do the same with your other piece. So I've done that one to keep the video a little bit shorter. All right, we need to mark our cuts that are going to go down here as well, like so. So the way I mark that, let me show you first how we set our marking gauge. So measure the width of your timber and divide that by 3. Set your marking gauge to your answer, whatever answer you've got. Place this in the vise and use the marking gauge to transfer down both sides. So I spun that around and I did the same that way, across and down. So I've done that one for you already, just to save a little bit of time. We're ready to cut this out. So we start by cutting away the middle on one of the pieces. So that's our waist area. So when I cut, I'm going to cut with the saw inside this area, hopefully with the blade right alongside that line there that's marked. So we're going to do 2 cuts and then we chisel away the middle. So let's cut it. So take your time here. This first cut, well, these first 2 cuts need to be really accurate. And I'm checking frequently to make sure I'm staying on my line and to check the depth of the cut. So I only want to cut down until I meet the line there that marks the width. There you go. We'll do the other one. There we go, we're cut. Chiseling now. Should be able to do this just on the bench. You're going to need a smaller chisel this time. Make sure they're sharp. And the accuracy of your joint will in a great way be determined by these first few cuts you do with the chisel. I don't think you'll be able to see, but what I'm trying to do is get that chisel right on that pencil line and just tap it in. So we're not building it in. It doesn't need to go deep. And so I've just got to move the chisel across a little because the chisel's not quite wide enough for this joint. Flip it over and we'll do exactly the same thing on the opposite side. So what I'm doing is getting the edge of the chisel, the sharp edge, on the pencil line. Now I'll stand the chisel up just tap it down. You don't need to hit it hard. And there we go. Hopefully you can see that. So that first little cut with the chisel hasn't gone deep, but I need to make sure it's right on the line, both sides. Now we can start removing the waste. That's probably the hardest part, is getting that started in the right place. So now we can use our chisel. We better get that pretty tight. And chisel away. Now if that doesn't quite break out, get the chisel against that cut edge and tap it in a bit further. See, my vise isn't tight. And go down another millimetre. Chisel away the waste. Tap it down. Chisel away the waste. Chisel down. Remove waste. We're about halfway, so I can turn this around. We do the same thing from the other side. We'll get that nice and tight to start with. The first bit of removing the waste, only remove a tiny amount. So once we get this cut edge set, everything becomes a bit easier. So now we put the back of our chisel against that previously cut edge. And my vise is still isn't tight enough. Start removing the waste. Well, there you go, that just broke out really easily. Sometimes that happens nicely for you. I'll place this in the vise like this. Now, on the bottom edge of this cut, sometimes it can be a little bit of a hill. So we need to remove the top of that hill. If we don't, our joint won't fit together nicely. So we're cutting on end grain, so it's a difficult cut. And what you specifically don't want to do here is let the chisel cut all the way through. So I'm cutting from the end and stopping just past halfway. And in fact, I'm digging it deeper, so it's actually creating a bit of a valley in there. So that will create a tighter joint and allow the pieces to fit together. There we go. That's pretty good. Now's a good time to pare away these edges. It's nice and tight vise is what you need. Just make that nice and smooth. And just get that on the edge there, just remove that. Oh yeah, that's looking good. Try not to let that happen. Okay, that's the first piece. Should be rather neat. There we go, second piece. So let's place our second piece. We've already marked our width here. Place this in the vise. And we'll lay this on top. Using our fingers here to make sure it's flush, and with a really sharp pencil, just trace inside each edges of those cuts. Looks good. And the other thing I'll do is I'll put a bit of a mark here and here, so I know which way around, so I don't accidentally get it the wrong way around when I put it together. Oh, don't take it out of the vise yet. We need our marking gauge. Now we set our marking gauge to match that pencil mark, and we'll transfer that down to meet. Oh, what's going on there? Put it up higher. That's better. And just across the top to put a little bit of a cut in the end. That's going to make chiseling later a little bit easier. Now, the other side may be different. Don't assume it's going to be exactly the same. Yeah, mine's slightly different. If anything, verge on the side of the cut, that would make the joint too tight. In other words, setting the gap between your point and your block too small on the marking gauge. That'll make the joint tight. If it's tight, it's fixable. If the joint's loose, well, you're stuck with a loose joint forever. There's nothing you can do about it. Alright, tenon saw, and we cut. Oh yeah, this time we're removing the waste on the outsides here. So that's a waste area. There's my little mark that I put so I know which way this thing goes together. I'm actually this time going to cut down and stop just short of my marking gauge mark. So I'm just high. The saw doesn't want to start cutting, so let's change our angle. Ready to chisel away waste. Now, I'm going to not quite chisel down to my mark. I'm going to try and keep it just above. So we'll chisel away about 1 millimetre at a time. Pretty close to my line, so just go just above. So remove that. Let's stop my phone ringing. So now I've turned it over, we'll come from the other side. Alright, stop just above. Now that I've got it there, I can start testing for fit. It's going to go that way. Still too tight at this stage, so you should be able to see in which areas you need to remove more material. Ever so carefully, just shave little bits away. Ooh, let's get them close. Now be careful not to just belt this together. If you belted this together and it's too tight, you'll split these up here. So it needs to be firm, but not too tight. You should be able to just work it together with your hands. You shouldn't need to belt it together. You'll break something if you tried. And then you've got to start all over again. All right, I think we're there. Yeah. All right, double check everything. That's our bridle joint.